John Coltrane is one of the most influential jazz musicians who ever lived. Alongside other greats like Miles Davis, Duke Ellington and Charlie Parker, Trane's musical legacy is hard to overstate. 35 years after his death, he remains the saxophonist by whom all others are judged. Courtney Pine has been listening to Coltrane since he was a teenager and remains in awe of his work.
Well, as a saxophone player, John Coltrane is probably the most advanced saxophone player this world has ever heard. He was able to do things on the saxophone, articulate certain patterns and structures symmetrically, to bend the saxophone into areas, to play notes, more than one note at a time. He took all these fragments of different saxophone techniques, all these different styles, from India, from the Western world, from all over the place, even dealing with cosmic structures, energy pulses. He would have things on the saxophone that we can't even still conceive of right now. He really was an advanced musician. I say musician because it transcended the fact that it was a saxophone. That's how good a saxophone player he was technically. He was able to play things that the saxophone wasn't supposed to play.
John Coltrane's like an archetype of what an artist should be, because he was someone who was wholly committed to self-discovery, wholly dedicated to the pursuit of his creativity, never rested, never tired, never was complacent with his music, was always pushing himself to the limits to discover new sounds.
Coltrane was a technical monster, okay? I mean, he knew anything and everything there was to know about that saxophone. And he was willing to, in the case of A Love Supreme, say his signature recording, take the saxophone and use it as a way to express his devotion to God. I mean, talk about someone who's both audacious at the same time as being incredibly humble, and to make it work so that so many different people were drawn to this album, drawn to the music and the statement, and still 35, 40 years later, still are, whether they're jazz heads or whether they're just into music in general. So much of what Coltrane was about, though, went far beyond his technical ability on the saxophone. He was, to many people, a cultural icon, a spiritual shaman, and still is today.
Coltrane's 1964 dedication to God, A Love Supreme, is regarded as his masterpiece.
Well, A Love Supreme means, it definitely means a departure from my way of thinking in terms of Western music. I was brought up as a Methodist, and I was led to believe that jazz music was the devil's music. Listening to A Love Supreme, it suddenly made me realize that this word creator, led to God. It's one and the same. And it's what Coltrane found, and what I believed all the time, that if you're creating something, this is a religious experience. And this album led me to that. And not just the lyrics, not just the energy, the ferocity that they played, not just the last piece, Psalm, the prayer, almost raga-ish type, the alap kind of sound that he created on that one. But it was just the whole energy, the whole pulse, the whole sincerity, the honesty of this album. He really was telling the truth.
In 1964, when he recorded A Love Supreme, he reaches this incredible creative and personal plateau. Even in his career, he had achieved what you could do as a jazz musician, the top tier. He had become this A-list talent who was headlining festivals, headlining at nightclubs for 2 weeks straight in any city he chose to play in. He had this unbelievable quartet that had this telepathic communication going on. It is a jazz album, but at the same time, it really just is an incredible achievement in that he knew exactly what he wanted to do, and he did it. He reached an audience that went far beyond borders, genres, considerations of what type of music it was, etc. Far beyond category, basically.
I cannot remember a time when I wasn't listening to that record, and when I didn't have not only the music of that record in my consciousness, but the imagery as well. A picture of John Coltrane on the album cover is one of the indelible visual images in my memory. His look and his gaze, and that record has always been with me.
It's pretty much jazz lore for modern players that at some time they cover a Coltrane tune. But for this year's festival, Courtney took things a step further, putting together an entire night playing his hero's music.
For me to do a concert of John Coltrane's music is just a deep honor to be able to go on stage and present his music. But for me, it's not just to play in a suit and tie and come on stage with an Elvin Jones type drummer or a Rashid Ali type drummer or musicians who sound like him and emulate what he does. For me, I want to play Coltrane's music, but in this day and age, in this style, because I think that his music is still relevant in the year 2002.